It's early morning in Scandinavia. Where is Scandinavia? What is Scandinavia? Well, Scandinavia also goes by the name the Nordic countries, and it's sometimes referred to as Norden. Who are they? Well, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. Those are the countries that we generally refer to as Scandinavia or the Nordic countries or Norden. In total, those five countries have a combined population of 28 million people. The largest is Sweden with about 10 million people. Just to give you some perspective, that's slightly less than the population of Texas. Again, many countries in Europe are not very large. Let's look at this map. Geography, maps, I like that. Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, there they all are. Notice the languages. In Iceland, they speak Icelandic, Norway, Norwegian, Sweden, Swedish, Denmark, Danish. Those four languages are all Indo-European languages. They're all Germanic languages. They are all closely related to each other. In fact, if you take Iceland out of the picture, the other three, Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish, are basically mutually comprehensible. In fact, Norwegian and Swedish, very much so. Iceland, because of isolation, it's been occupied for 900 plus years. It's out there in the middle of the North Atlantic, is slightly odder. So it's out at a little bit of a distance. Then remember, Finnish is a Uralic language. It comes from that Uralic family. It's unrelated to those other languages. The way I'd like to go through Scandinavia is by talking about the commonalities mostly. First, they all have cool, moist climates, but those climates are influenced by the North Atlantic drift. If you remember at the beginning of Europe, I told you about the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic Drift, which is a warm water current that flows from the Gulf of Mexico across the North Atlantic and into Europe. It moderates the climates of northwestern Europe. Well, these places in Scandinavia are cool and wet because of low pressure and this very high latitude, but they're significantly warmer than they would be if it wasn't for that warm water current. The warm water current isn't warm, though. If you jumped into the water in Iceland, you would certainly not think the water was warm, but it's warmer than it would be considering the latitude. These areas were also heavily glaciated during what most people call the Ice Age, which is really the Pleistocene epoch that went from about 2.6 million years ago until about 10,000 years ago. You can see the Jökulsárlón in Iceland. Those are glaciers. Those are mountains. Because of the glaciation, every place in Scandinavia, with the exception of Denmark, has very poor soils. Those large glaciers over hundreds of thousands of years scraped the soil off. Denmark has that loess soil that we met in Germany. So Denmark is very fertile. It also has this cool, moist climate, which limits it, but nevertheless, it's very fertile. Much of the rest of Scandinavia is not very fertile. You can see this is an area in the Scandinavian peninsula, and it's mostly exposed rock. In fact, in Iceland, there's almost no soil at all. Here's a Danish exception. You can see that Denmark is flat. Additionally, much of it is farmland. But just like Germany, the agriculture is focused overwhelmingly on animal products because of that cool, moist climate. It's just difficult to grow lots of crops in a climate that's cool and wet. Here's some more commonalities. Because it's so far north, Scandinavia has very long daylight periods during the summer and very long nighttime periods during the winter. This is just because of that high latitude. In fact, in some places in the very northern reaches of Scandinavia, The sun doesn't set at all during the summer, it's 24 hours of daylight, and the sun doesn't rise at all during the winter, it's 24 hours of darkness. We call this the land of the midnight sun because that's exactly what it is. By any standards, the Scandinavian countries, all of them, are very expensive. And they rely heavily on imported food because the climates and the soils just do not allow for enough production. There's near universal English-speaking populations in those countries. English is taught in school from a very, very early age. I believe the governments have recognized that no one's going to learn Icelandic or Norwegian or Finnish. So why not just equip your population with the global language, which is English? And that is exactly what they do. All of these countries have primate cities. Reykjavik in Iceland, Oslo in Norway, Stockholm in Sweden, Helsinki in Finland, and Copenhagen in Denmark. All of these are not only the capital cities, they're primate cities. And Scandinavia has the wildest, least humanized landscape in Europe. Europe is the most humanized landscape in the world, but that northern tier is not very humanized. You can see on the left-hand side an erupting volcano in Iceland. It's a very tectonically active location. You can see the Vatnajökull in Iceland, also very wild landscape. This is a fjord in Norway. Remember, we met fjords in Chile. These are these glacially carved valleys that as sea level rose over the last 10,000 years and the glaciers receded back into the mountains, these valleys that were formed and carved by glaciers along the coastline filled in with water. And stretching across Scandinavia, this particular picture is from Finland, is what's known as the taiga forest, which is a coniferous needle-leaf forest. It goes from Scandinavia all the way across Russia, almost to the Pacific coast of Asia. I realize that the tree in the foreground is a deciduous tree, but if you look in the background, you can see this landscape of wild, really coniferous forest. That forest is called the taiga forest. In terms of natural resources, Norway is the main recipient of North Sea oil. The fact that they get that North Sea oil has completely transformed the country. During the 1960s and early 1970s, before the oil began to be exploited in a large way, Norway was one of the poorest countries in Europe. It was a backwards fishing country, but that North Sea oil has completely transformed the country, and it pays for cradle to grave everything. In the northern part of Sweden, in an area where Kiruna is at, they have some of the richest and highest quality iron ore in the world. Out of iron ore, you make steel. All of these countries provide incredible social services. All of the Scandinavian countries have universal health care. They all have universal higher education. In other words, the government pays for your education if you go to get a college or university degree. They all have high standards of living by anybody's standard. And they pay for this with high taxes. Just to give you an idea, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the highest tax rate is something in the neighborhood of 60%, income taxes I'm talking about. In Norway, it's lower because they utilize the oil wealth to pay for services, and in Iceland, it's also a bit lower. Now, economically, I'm going to give you some companies that you may very well have heard of, just to show you that even these small countries have global reach. You've probably heard of Volvo, IKEA, Ericsson, Spotify, Electrolux, and H&M. That's right, the clothing company. Those are all Swedish companies. Maersk, which is a transportation company, you can see them on the freeway. Lego, I bet you heard of that. Carlsberg, it's a beer company. These are all Danish companies. And throughout Scandinavia, there are many, many, many more corporations that operate throughout the world.